Hi folks, Riley from the Awesome Players Off-Road Motorcycle Club here, and thanks for joining us again on another ride. Today's ride is going to be a little different. We had two interesting things right from the get-go. The first was that we would have communications for the very first time. Chris and I and Joe had all taken the plunge and invested in the Sena system, and this would be the first time that Chris and I would be joining in. Joe had used these quite extensively on some travels with his wife and some friends and really enjoyed them. So we had cracked open our wallets and we were going to find out if it was really going to add anything to the experience. And the second thing is that we were going to have a new guy joining us. I don't think it's just a motorcycle specific thing, but whenever you have a group of guys and you've kind of set up a dynamic and everybody's getting along, it's always interesting to see what happens when you introduce someone new to the mix. And through the magic of the internet and YouTube and Facebook, we do get the occasional person who's local and says, hey, can I come and ride with you guys? And we're always open to that, and then you never know how it's going to turn out. Some people come along and they don't realize that their bike is going to get scratched, and that at some point you're going to get into some uncomfortable positions, or perhaps you're going to get really tired and dirty and sweaty and they're not into it. Other times guys come along and they're just way more hardcore than us, in which case they ride with us for a little while and then either their skill set just develops way beyond us, and we've had that happen where guys have just become much more aggressive hardcore riders and then they don't really fit into our style of riding. And in other cases there's just no chemistry, or they don't quite get our sense of humor, and they also move along. Today's unknown quantity would be Dave, and Dave was meeting us in the parking lot of a shopping center on the side of the highway on his brand new F650GS. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the bizarre BMW naming scheme of recent years, the F650GS is the same size as the F800GS in terms of displacement, but it's detuned for less power, and it comes with cast wheels and a more street setup suspension with a 19-inch front wheel instead of a 21. And to make matters even more interesting, shortly after that they took the same bike and they renamed it the F700GS, which of course was a good idea because they already had some bikes called 650GSs, which were the smaller single-cylinder Rotax-powered bikes that they'd been selling for many years. But I digress. Let's get back to where our story starts, early on a Sunday morning.
I told you it was shiny.
Wow! You weren't lying when you said it was shiny.
No, I was not lying when I said it was shiny, because it needs to be before and after.
Yes.
Very clean.
Holy, it's got the white lithium on the chain. Yikes. The bottom of the center stand still has paint.
That's a repaint. How are you?
Chris,
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Riley, at last.
Nice to meet you.
Joe.
Nice to meet you, Jack.
All right, we just got to install some comms on his helmet because he was late.
Yes,
Okay.
as usual. Due to traffic.
Not children.
No, it's not the child, it's the wife that's the problem.
The child producer? I'm not editing that out.
Yeah.
Oh, is that the,
That's the release.
oh, nice.
Holy bejesus, that's sticky stuff.
Push that when you need release, Joe.
So,
After a quick introduction with Dave and a tour of his bike, we set about installing the comm systems in Chris's helmet. In order to give Dave the full Awesome Players experience, we, of course, had to start our ride at Tim Hortons. Dave being an unknown quantity with a shiny new bike, we decided that we would start off slowly and just see what Dave was up for.
Do you hear me now? How's that? Oh, hold on. Hello? Hello? I hear him. I hear Chris.
When that happens, you use that big module out, put it back. Contact like that.
Comms breakdown. We have a comms breakdown.
newfangled ones are crap.
These newfangled radios. You don't hear him? Yeah, how now?
Nope.
Okay, hold on.
We were also experiencing a few issues with our comm system,
Even the audio.
Okay, it's on.
and I could see that there was going to be a little bit of a learning curve here on getting these set up, and all these buttons you could push and hold for 3 seconds, or tap this once or tap this twice.
Hello?
No, not yet.
Hello?
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 You hear me? Hello?
Yep, there we go.
Okay, we're good.
Move it.
Let's get. I hear you. It's like I'm in your brain. All right.
We finally got the comms working, and already I could see that this was going to be fun. And here's a prime example.
Okay.
They had missed the turn, and I was able to say, hey boys, come on back. We're heading in here to give Dave a peek at the old quarry.
All right.
The old quarry is kind of a cool place, and it's a regular stop when we're giving somebody new a tour. One thing's for certain, you wouldn't want to scream down this trail because right in front of me is about a 35-foot drop-off.
Exit. I like it.
And to lose their TVs that no longer wanted.
Yeah. Oh, and there's some nice swampage down there. That's nice.
We also took this time to take a little look at Dave's machine. He had some engine crash bars on it,
Factory skid plate?
but the skid plate looked a little substandard,
That's not bad.
and upon closer examination, we could see that it didn't even go all the way back and cover all of the oil pan, which seemed like a pretty poor design. It really is quite curious to me why anybody would make an aftermarket skid plate that doesn't go back and cover at least the entire bottom of the engine. I can tell you this much, if you looked under my bike, which has a Moto Overland skid plate on it, you would certainly see some good gouges right in the area where Dave's bike was naked as a jaybird.
Okay, so any advice for this?
Stand on the pegs, just stay smooth. Try to get into second gear. Like low speed second gear is actually better than first gear. It won't be so jerky.
Okay.
And just look where you want to go. Don't focus on the shit in the front tire. Don't follow Chris. But yeah, like just focus on where you want to go. So it's the usual like street avoidance crap. If you look at that rut or that rock, it's pretty hard not to go there. And keep your elbows up. Because when your elbows are down, it's really hard to absorb the bumps. So if you go elbows up, it's your like poor man steering damper.
Okay.
And also it just puts you in that much more athletic stance. So you've got much more control.
Sure.
So, you know, don't micromanage. Try to keep a relatively loose grip on the bars. Keep your elbows up. And just look where you want to go.
Okay.
And there's nothing along here that's crazy, like challenging. At some point there's a lot of like big mud puddles.
So as you just heard, Dave had asked me if I had any advice for off-road riding. If you've been watching these videos, you know that I'm probably not the best person to ask for off-road riding advice, but I had to say something. So I decided to go with the old standard, routine of stand up on the pegs, keep your elbows up, stay loose, and look where you want to go. We hadn't gone very far before I spotted the fact that Dave had made a rookie mistake.
Your rear bag's open.
When I think back on the last few years of riding, I know for a fact Chris has done this, Joe has done this, I've done this. We've all left a trail of property behind us at some point or another. Joe and Chris had pulled over to wait for us, and eventually we caught up to them.
Oh, man down.
And Dave got a little wiggly there, and you can see by the skid mark he got on the brakes. I think he actually felt like he was charging up on Joe a little too much. So he got on the brakes, and of course the ABS was off. So the rear wheel locked, and the front wheel I think skidded a bit too, and down he went.
We have a man down.
This is the moment where you usually find out how the new guy is going to fit in by watching how he reacts to that first fall.
He's got her.
And I gotta say, so far, Dave didn't seem too upset by the whole incident.
Yes, the folding shift lever is a good thing.
Next thing on the list.
The good news is, I got it on tape.
Ah, he's back.
And as you just saw, for some mysterious reason, the F800GS, F700GS, F650GS, whatever model, none of them come with a folding shift lever, which is a really bad idea, because when that bike falls and that shift lever hammers into the ground, quite a few people have bent the shift fork inside the transmission for that very reason. So high on your list of purchases, if you're going to take your 800 into the dirt, would be to buy a folding lever. And if you don't want to spring for the expensive Touratech ones, there is a cheap Honda lever that fits the 800, and I'll try to put the link down in the description.
Oh. Well, we had a little lay down there.
Eventually we got to the little sand pit,
No, I think he's all right.
which is the perfect place for a new guy to get his feet wet and get a little experience riding in some sand.
I think it's time for an interview.
All right, David, what happened back there?
It was either throw it down and be brave and manly about it, or ram into Joe. Sorry, we're going up Joe's back end. Is not what I'm after.
You wouldn't be the first. I saw, yeah, I was following. I said, I'll get a little closer because the video will be better. And then I saw, oh, that bike's laying on its side. So yeah, that's the other, yeah, I'm funny because not too long before that, I saw you following Joe.
Yeah.
And I said, I think David's going to learn a valuable lesson.
Of not being too
About
close.
not being too close, because
Yeah.
at some point somebody chooses a different line, and also because Joe's bike's so much smaller, he can kind of crawl up those hills without momentum.
I was watching where Joe was going. I thought, hey, he's only about 8 feet from me. That's probably a bit too close. Oh, there's the ground.
Yeah. So this is actually a great spot.
Actually, it looks a lot steeper in real life than it does on
I know, that's
on
the
the videos.
that's the GoPro thing. So basically, the nice thing about this joint is there's no real rocks of size in that sand, so you can fall there 1,000 times, and
Which I probably will.
makes for really good video. But
While we were standing around, Chris realized he had a broken headlight.
Must have been when I got trapped underneath it last weekend.
so basically, now the bike's no longer mint.
Yeah, exactly.
Resale just, anyways, I guess you have to keep it now.
I was committed right from the get-go.
You were well on your way to keeping this bike.
Yes.
Joe, how was it out there?
Happened hot.
It says it's 23, but I don't believe it.
Oh man, it's hotter than that.
It's hotter than 23. I think my,
So when you started going
I don't have any more layers to strip down.
that's it.
Fun. Yeah.
Chris, what happened? Lost it? Help is on the way.
Oddly enough, it was Chris who had the first spill in the sand pit, and he was very rude in that he did it when we weren't videotaping.
Holy crap! That's steeper than it looks.
Yeah, just a bit.
Okay, we've got our top man on it. Dave is up there. Holy shillelaghs. How's your body?
You want to see where my tire was when I fell?
Yeah.
I just twisted my wrist too.
Oh. Which wrist? Your pre-marriage wrist?
The left one.
Oh, that's okay.
And at that point, I realized it was better to fall because
It was better to fall than go over the abyss?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you'd gone over the abyss without a camera on your helmet, we never would have forgiven you. All right. Well, did you want to do any checks on the brakes while we're here? No. It's all good. Wow. Ready? Hey, want me to pull the nose around?
No, I'm just gonna go
This way? You got her?
Yep.
What was he thinking?
Thinking? When did that ever come in?
So what's the damage?
Finish off my front one.
Oh,
No, it's just my the instrument, the controls.
yeah.
The only damage to Chris's bike was some rotated controls, so while he was fixing that, we threw the GoPro onto the X-Challenge to see if Joe could entertain us. I think Joe's plan was to follow Dave and hope for some good footage, But just then we had some visitors.
Go for it. Do not let the man with the gun scare you.
The owners of the pickup truck had showed up, each one of them with a rifle, and they had a dog with them for good measure. But they didn't seem interested in shooting us, so Dave gave it a shot himself and ran out of steam. Didn't quite make it all the way up.
He didn't make it. Nobody ever does. Oh, Joe's not making it either. Oh, he made it.
On his second attempt, Dave gave it a little more gas,
He got it.
and he made it.
Nice job.
Stand up.
Bail!
Let the clutch out.
Nice one.
Hi, Joe. I think he's got it.
Well, that was fun.
See, it's a little easier when you go a little faster. Right?
Yeah,
Coming down is a whole other world.
that's a whole nother skill set, isn't it?
Yeah, you gotta kind of get back on the bike
Yeah,
and just let it wiggle.
and hopefully don't stall it like I did.
Yeah, dead stick landing and makes it a little tougher.
Well, bang on.
Yeah, it was good.
That was fun.
Break time.
One of the things we don't have any footage of is me getting mauled by that dog. I walked over to talk to the two guys with the rifles just to see what their plans were and to let them know which direction we were heading, and out of nowhere this dog just came at me, clamped onto my leg, and luckily for me I had my motocross boot on because man, he punched some holes right through the leather reinforcing at the bottom of my pants, and if I hadn't had that big motocross boot on, that would have been ugly. They were able to wrestle the thing off me and get it in its kennel, but that was quite exciting.
Yeah, this is actually kind of fun, this section here, up this hill. It's nice, but
Dave seemed up for a little more excitement,
basically experience nothing.
so we went back to where we'd been the previous weekend to check out what that trail would be like without the torrential downpour. Once again, you know, Dave was obviously pretty fresh, and he didn't have the most aggressive tires on, so we didn't want to get him into anything over his head. But a lot of these trails, even if they are super gnarly, if you get to something you're not comfortable with, someone else can always ride your bike through that section. Or you can just paddle along in first gear. And as long as you don't get stuck, you're still going to make it through. The intercom was turning out to be quite fun too. We were having some problems with the range. The range wasn't fantastic, especially when someone went over a hill. But it was nice when someone missed a turn, like right here, and I was able to say to Chris that no, I think if we want to go back to where we were last weekend, we need to take a right. Since everyone else had missed the turn, it looked like I was going to take the lead for the moment. My first thought climbing this was that this would be a little interesting for Dave.
This might be a little gnarly for our friend.
So I didn't go all the way up. I waited till the slope flattened out a little bit so I could wait and see if Dave was going to need a hand.
How's he doing?
Joe on the X-Challenge, of course, didn't have much trouble putting up in first gear. A few moments later, Dave rolled by, so he was doing really well. We knew that the roughest section of this trail was just ahead, and with that in mind, and through the magic of the intercom, we agreed that it would be a good idea to stop and have a little chat with Dave.
You know, our kind of rule of thumb is, you know, just ride your own ride, don't do anything you don't want to do. Okay. So this whole first section is like this, and then at some point it turns off and it goes into the forest. None of it, there's some greasy spots, but what I was doing last week, I was just walking through them, paddle, because they were greasy and I didn't want to fall. So, you know, at some point if you find it's too whatever, just let us know and we'll turn around. It's no biggie, and it should be better than last Sunday, because last Sunday
was pissing rain.
the rain was coming down sideways. Some of these trails were actually rivers, so it's going to be better than that. But yeah, the greasy, you watch out for the greasy black earth because it's really slippery, and in those sections, a lot of times I just slow down in first gear and just paddle.
Okay.
Instead of just, you know.
Yeah, sure.
So, ABS definitely off. Oh yeah, this is a little gnarly here, I forgot.
Chris and I were following Dave, And he was definitely going a little slower than we were used to, which made some of these obstacles a little more awkward because you didn't have any momentum. But I was quite happy that at least he wasn't feeling obligated to go faster than he wanted to go. And he did have the K60s, which, to be realistic, are pretty crappy compared to the knobbies that Chris and I and Joe were running. So he was still doing really well. And here's a prime example. He got into a little section here that I'm pretty sure if he had a more aggressive tire on, he wouldn't have been spinning as much.
Stay in the groove.
You've heard me say that before, and it was even taught to us on one of the BMW off-road courses we went on. In a lot of situations on these big heavy bikes, when you've got side slopes, it's just easier to put the bike in a groove sometimes and follow it. And this trail looks pretty flat, but the edges are kind of cambered in. And as long as the groove isn't so deep that you start dragging bits, a lot of the times it's the easiest way to go.
Whoa, whoa. Take your time. Hey, this is where I dropped it last time. Yep. Okay, let me cross.
So far, Dave was being, I guess, a good egg in the sense that this is a bike he rides to work 5 days a week during the summer, and he didn't seem to be all that upset about getting it dirty and a little scuffed up. And for a guy who hadn't done any off-roading, he was keeping it upright. He hit a bit of a soft spot here, and with those K60s, he was spinning a lot more. I was spinning here as well. But the difference was when I was spinning, the bike actually moved forward. Well, I think Dave's tire just turned into a glazed donut, and he had to push. The beauty of the GoPro, that rock I just passed looks like it's about 4 inches tall. It's probably about a foot tall.
You need help?
Once again, the intercom was proving handy because I was hearing from behind me that Dave was going to need a little muscle, but Chris and Joe were on the job and I didn't have to go back. Joe was in the lead at this point, and he stopped at the top of what was going to be the gnarly downhill section.
Yeah, there's a technique up ahead.
We had actually stopped quite a ways back from the start of this downhill section because we really wanted to show it to Dave so that if he wasn't comfortable with it, we could turn around. And this stuff was pretty greasy, so we knew that if we kind of got over the crest, it was going to be a real pain to turn around.
The footage of this looked amazing. It was water running down here. It looked like we were in the Amazon. Yeah, we just bypass it.
Cheers for your help there, Chris. If I can pick a wrong line, I managed to do it twice. I was like, right along path, please. Oh fuck, there's a puddle. They're going one puddle, the entire path, and I'm in it.
If you look at it, you're gonna go towards it.
But you know what? On the
I
heavy,
didn't see it until I was in it.
but on the heavy bikes, you know what? A lot of those things, as long as the
His tire's plugging up though.
but as long as you're in that groove,
It's turning into a slick when you go through that stuff.
if you're not bottoming out in the trench, it's easier just to stay in the trench.
Yeah.
You can't slip out. You can't fall in the trench.
Yeah.
I hear you. All right, entering the bypass. I am entering.
Dave was still having a good time, and he was up for it. So we decided to continue down the trail and see what happened.
Hey, I can actually ride this bit.
The first part of the bypass was fine, but then as we got to the bottom, this loose, soupy section that we'd been through the week before had turned more into some sort of congealed muck. That was really hard going, and I could just tell from looking at it that this was going to be some tough sledding. I was just digging a hole, so I shut her off and got ready to break out the douche rope. Chris decided to try this overgrown trail to our right, and because it wasn't actually all torn up, it actually worked.
Give her! Woo! I think it's douche rope time. Let's get douching. There's no riding. There's only douching.
A little worse than it was last time.
Well, last weekend this was like porridge. Now it's hardened up.
Well, what gets me is if he's stuck.
Yeah, you'll be stuck too.
I think we can pretty much guarantee that.
Yeah. I have to do something very urgent.
All right.
While Dave went off to have a tinkle, the rest of us geared up to do our little recovery operation here.
Well, last time
One thing's for sure, if you've got 3-4 guys,
you just went straight through
you're going to get the bike unstuck. I mean, that bike probably weighs 550 pounds, give or take, fully kitted up. And with 4 guys, worst case scenario, you could probably just lift the thing up and carry it. So we knew we were going to get unstuck. It was just a matter of how much energy we were going to expend to do so.
Clutch. Golden. Okay, park it. Park it, Bill.
The X-Challenge being so much lighter didn't really require any douching. So Dave and Chris were able to just push it out. I also think the 800 was probably dragging its belly a bit in that muck. Then it was Dave's turn.
Now to learn what 500 pounds really is.
Even though the last 2 bikes to go through here hadn't really required much effort, we somehow came up with the genius idea that we wouldn't just follow the groove we'd already made. We were going to get Dave's bike out of the groove onto this kind of virgin territory on the side and try a different route that was somehow going to be easier.
So we'll go straight up and over here.
Initially, everything went right to plan, and Dave was able to feather the throttle, and we got the bike up on the side of the trail here, out of that trench.
Bloody lovely. Hold on.
I really think it's another right.
I think you're right. Won't be as good on video, but might involve less lifting.
I'm all for that.
I'm not sure if the side of the trail was any better than the trail itself, but with Chris pushing and Dave running the controls and Riley on the rope, we managed to pull the F650 out of there in about as much time as if we had just stayed in the original groove.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Back her up. That's where this rope is a key.
Once again, the douche rope had proved its usefulness and gotten us out of a nasty jam. Not to say that you couldn't get out of a situation like that without the douche rope, but it was certainly going to be a lot more work.
That's sweaty, man.
We weren't out of the woods yet. We still had quite a bit of rutted, muddy trail ahead of us.
Right, we rode the ridge last time.
We went down here last time.
We went down the ridge. You can see our tracks.
Yeah, we went down here.
Chris and I were trying to remember the route we had taken the week before. Dave got into some trouble pretty quick. This is one of those things that can really suck a lot of energy out of you. Anytime you've got to start manhandling these big heavy bikes, you're just burning through a lot of calories. And of course, it's usually the guy with the least experience who's making the most mistakes, who's working the hardest. So it kind of becomes a catch-22 situation, where the guy who's the most burned out keeps getting more and more burned out. What you can see happen on some rides is the more experienced guys, or the guys on the smaller bikes who have better skills, will be out in front, and they'll stop to wait for the stragglers. And then as soon as the stragglers show up, the lead guys take off. So now you get into a strange situation where the guys who are expending the least amount of energy, who are the best riders, are getting rest because they're constantly stopping to wait for the newbies to catch up. And the poor newbie guy, who's working like a dog and sweating like a hog, every time he catches up to the leaders, they just keep moving, and he actually never gets to rest. So I think it's a good idea sometimes to remember that tail end Charlie there, he needs to take a break too. And he's working harder probably than anyone else on the ride. Chris had managed to make it through this section without any help, and was nice enough to come back to give Dave a hand. And Dave almost went over there. I don't know how Chris managed to hold Dave and that big BMW from falling over, but he did. He's probably got lower back issues for life now. Now here's a good example of what difference a tire makes. Dave spun the whole way through this section, and I was able to kind of crawl through with my knobby on the back without any assistance.
Nice catch for Christopher. How much do you think he was holding up there? Great time.
I could see just by looking at him that Dave was pretty tuckered out.
All right.
So I think it was time for everybody to pull their helmets off and drink some water and take a break.
Sweaty. Oh. Oh no, don't dig a hole. No, let's get the rope.
I'm gonna be very sad.
Rope.
After our break, we all made it through this section, oddly enough, except Joe on the smallest, lightest bike, just because he decided to try a different line and it just sank in. So instead of us all standing around in the muck getting sprayed, it was time once again to break out the trusty, crusty douche rope and do some pulling.
All right, so if you grab that end, keep it out of the muck, and I'll strap him in.
We got Joe's bike rigged up.
That's all right. Okay. Oh, fuck. Hold it.
And then with 3 guys on the rope, we weren't expecting much difficulty here in pulling out the little 650. You can see there's a few loops on the douche rope, which make it a lot easier to hold on to.
Okay, he's good. Whoa. Let her down. Huh. Easy with the rope, eh? With 600 pounds on the end.
There was one more little obstacle, and then we were cruising. And you can see here, Chris made it up past that log, and there was a bit of a rut. Then it was Super Dave's turn.
Whoa, man down.
And I think Dave was just done. Not only was it a hot and humid day, and Dave had put in a pretty good effort, but you're also stressed. When you go on these first rides, it's a little more stressful, and that in itself takes a bit of a toll on you.
All right.
Then it was my turn. Even though this was only our first ride using these intercoms, I could see that this was going to add a whole new dimension to our riding. Not only on the trail, where you could communicate obstacles or problems, but just the fact that when you've got to do an hour or an hour and a half's worth of riding to get to the trailhead, you could actually chew the fat and kind of socialize, which is nice, because one of the things that happens is we'll meet at the Tim Hortons or somewhere, and perhaps we haven't gotten together for a couple of weeks, and you might end up sitting there for an hour just chatting because you're trying to catch up. With the intercom, you can get all your chit chat and everything out of the way before you even get to the trail.
It's a little greasy on that hill farm.
This video was shot in 2014, and since then we've done a lot of riding with Dave. Dave is actually one of the core members now of our group here in Montreal. Dave has also acquired the nickname Super Dave, which is kind of funny because everyone who lives here in North America of a certain age knows Super Dave from a very popular TV show, and Dave, being from the UK, of course, had no idea who Super Dave was. After watching this video, you would get the impression that Super Dave is not the kind of guy who's a big complainer. But you'd actually be wrong, because Dave has been complaining for many years that whenever we go to an event, the motorcycle show, there's always a couple of people that recognize Chris or myself or Henrik or Joe from the videos, but they never recognize Dave because we're so far behind on the videos that he hasn't been in any of the videos yet. So Dave, stop your belly aching. I think for his first ride with us, we'd given Dave a pretty good feeling for what it was like to do one of our Sunday morning jaunts. We had started at Tim Hortons, we had hit some gravel roads, we'd gotten stuck in some mud, we had broken out the douche rope. The only thing left to complete the entire package would be to find a terrace where we could sit outside and enjoy a cold beer. All right, time for the post-ride debrief. Joe,
Shy.
yeah, you missed a lot of the rides this year. How was it?
It was excellent.
Did you fall down?
No, not the once. Well, actually, my bike fell down once, but I wasn't on it.
Where were you? Oh, someone else was riding.
Great.
Yeah, okay. I crashed a bike that wasn't mine.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Wasn't really a
My
crash.
first time off road. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Yeah, you ain't getting rid of
So
me that
you
easily.
you will come again?
Absolutely.
All
If
right.
I'm invited. I've got to now. I've got the sticker on the front of the bike.
He's ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris, we had comms.
Yeah, it was good, except for that, you know, it doesn't work unless you're
Yeah, range
right next to
wasn't
each
that
other.
great. Plus, I kept forgetting to mute it when I burped.
Yeah, that's all right.
Cheers.
Quicksand.
Cheers. You got a broken glass here, right? You can get
I
one
know.
here.
If you have any questions or comments, don't be shy. Anything to do with the bikes, the gear, anything we could possibly help you with, drop us a line. You can do so here on YouTube by leaving a comment. You can also hit the subscribe button and then you'll know when our newest videos come out right away. You can head over to awesomeplayers.com, and if you prefer there, you can find our email information. You can also click on the order tab, and the order tab will take you to where you can buy one of our Awesome Players stickers. Perfect for lowering the value of your motorcycle or covering up some crash damage. As well, we have a Facebook page, so you can go to Facebook, you can contact us there, and you can see some of the stuff that Awesome Players around the world are sharing with us. Whether it's just a photo or a ride report, we love hearing from you there as well. Once again, thanks for joining us for another little adventure of the Awesome Players Off-Road Motorcycle Club. Oh yeah, and if you see Dave, would you say hi?